Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. If you're somebody that feels like you're just stuck in life, things aren't moving forward, maybe it's your personal relationships, maybe it's your job, your career, there's something you can do for that. And it's pretty amazing that it goes back centuries. We're going to talk about that today with somebody who basically wrote the book about that. It's a book that helps a lot of people, including therapists, of which she is one. It's called The Sacred Path of the Therapist, and she is Dr. Irene R. Siegel, and she's with us today. Welcome. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Love the book. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been out a few years, but I really feel that now is the time that people can be open to this kind of information.
Now is the time.
Yes.
It really is. I'm finding more and more people learning about energy, accepting the fact that we are all energy. Even when I walk into a Starbucks and I'll see somebody that has a bracelet on, which, represents energy, depending on how you want to look at it. It's nice seeing a younger generation realizing what's going on there, that we are all energy. Why don't we start there in talking about energy for anybody that doesn't realize what it is and how it really governs everything we do?
Well, this really then takes me back to my own training. So I've been a therapist for over 30 years, but along the way, I've also been a meditator, and I've studied with healers of Incan descent, North American Indian descent, and it's really been a journey for me, a spiritual journey, to bring what I've learned into my practice. So when we talk about energy, in ancient wisdom traditions, they believe that everything is energy, that everything has a frequency to it. This table, this jacket, this us, there's an energy to it, there's a frequency to it. So in my training, in terms of working with healers and learning to meditate, I feel that energy is the foundation of it. It's the fabric that holds everything together. So in these ancient wisdom traditions, they believe that the energy has a frequency to it. And this starts to parallel some of what we're learning in terms of quantum physics, okay? Everything has a frequency to it, but ancient wisdom traditions have used this for centuries in healing. I mean, this is the basis of homeopathy. You take a substance of one frequency and you blend it with something else, and the lower always meets the higher. And that's what it is. The lower frequency resonates to the higher and not the other way around. I have found in my own practice that those premises hold true in terms of how I work with clients. So for me, my book and the way I train therapists, the way I teach people how to meditate, it's about shifting their own frequency to something higher in terms of consciousness. It's about higher consciousness.
For anybody that thinks this is woo-woo kind of stuff, when you say to somebody, let's say they're going to have surgery, and you say, hey, I'm sending positive vibes, or I'm sending prayers, that's what you're doing. You're sending a higher vibration. I love reggae music, and it's all about a positive vibration.
Well, exactly.
And again, this has been going on forever.
Look, we all the time, are holding some kind of frequency within us. We've all had the experience, I believe, where you're with a group of people, someone walks in the door, and everyone stops, and they turn around.
Yeah.
And they say, what just happened? There was a shift in the field. It could be someone who is depressed. It could be someone who is elated, but something changed.
Sure.
And we sense it, and we take a look at it. Every therapist, when they're working with a client, they're coming in with their own mood, with their own experience. There's an energy to it that contributes to the field.
Same thing to your point, you go to a party, and this doesn't feel right. I don't know, we're going to get out of here earlier.
Right.
Or, I didn't think it was going to be so good. I'm feeling good.
Yeah.
Because it's the vibration of everybody in there collectively is higher. And
Exactly.
it just feels good.
Exactly. People walk into my office. I've heard people say over the years, I walk into your office, I sit in the waiting room, and I just relax. There's a feeling in there that I can't put my finger on, but it feels great. Because myself and my colleague in the office, we intentionally work in these higher ranges of energy. So people sense it, And what I'm teaching is really just for therapists to make a conscious choice about what they come into the session with. Where is their awareness? What's their level of consciousness? How does that affect what's happening in the field? So when a client steps into my office, and I also do a lot of work over Zoom, remote work since the pandemic, it doesn't matter if you're sitting next to each other like we are,
Yeah.
or if you are just miles apart and using Zoom.
Same thing with sending a prayer to somebody.
Same thing.
You know,
The
and they're in
space,
Florida, you're in New York.
the space doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But I teach therapists and I teach the general public how to be in that deep space of mindfulness, how to create an attunement between themselves and the other person, and how to create a resonance with what I call spiritual resonance. And I actually did a research study on this that was published with therapists. So what happens when we, as a therapist, connect to a higher part of ourselves, connect to whatever you want to call it, spirit, God, higher consciousness,
Universe, source, whatever
the
you wanna call
universe,
it.
whatever
Sure.
it is, and we're holding that in ourselves while we're with our client. In my experience, it changes everything.
I want to ask you that right at this point.
Okay.
And this is what you teach other therapists and you practice it yourself. Before a session with somebody, what do you do? How do you get in a certain mindset? How do you raise your energetic vibration to bring the most to the session?
Different therapists do it different ways, okay? Now, I've studied meditation for many years. There's a program that I studied over 30 years ago, and I'm a teacher for the program called Awakening Your Light Body. It's a 6-month program where we go through energy centers similar to the chakras, but closer to a soul level. The program that I teach was created by Dwayne Packer and Sanaya Roman, and it's learning how to bring awareness to each center until you open into what's called the light body, which is your spiritual body. So for me, I sit with a client, or I'm sitting with you, okay? And I bring up that energy in my imagination and my awareness. I just feel the energy expanding. And that's it. And now I'm interacting with the client. I don't have to say to the client I'm doing this.
Sure.
But when I work with a client, I do a lot of work where the client sits quietly in quiet space with their eyes closed. Some clients just expand into it and talk about their own experience. Other clients will open their eyes and say, I felt you right in front of me, but you're on the other side of the room. Or they'll be on Zoom and they'll say, I just felt you.
I feel connected.
I feel connected. That's what it is. It's a connection. So for me, that's how it is. Other therapists might do meditation in the morning or meditate before their session. Some therapists use imagery, which for me also there's some imagery involved as I feel energy moving and I can almost like see the field taking shape. When my client is in silent space processing, I'm also in that space and I am envisioning what's happening in the field. And I'm just in a flow. And the session flows in ways that even I would not expect.
It's all coming together, it seems like.
Yes.
Where sometimes you could be in a therapy session and you're not feeling like they're getting it. I've tested this. I've gone to the gym, and before I walk in, I'll say to myself, all right, Steve, raise your vibration. Raise it up. Let's raise it up. Bring it up. Bring it up. And I'll walk in, and people will pass me. They're strangers. I know a couple of people at the gym, and they'll turn and they'll smile.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing anything different. My face is still the same. You know, I have a nice, a smile on, but I'm not. It's not a cheesy grin trying to
Right.
get somebody to react. But it's worth trying. Like for anybody that thinks it's kind of, this doesn't really work. Yeah, it does.
You know, you remind me of an experience. One year I came back from the Amazon jungle. I was working with a healer in the jungle. So for 2 weeks, I'm busy meditating and I'm in the jungle. I come back and I go to the mall, which was a complete culture shock. But I'm walking through the mall and every eye would turn on me. Everyone would do a double
Yeah.
take.
It's almost like, is something not right with me?
Right.
My
Because
clothes-
I was just still in that energy.
Yeah.
And people sensed
Picking
something.
up on it.
They didn't know what they were picking up on.
Yeah.
but they were sensing it.
So you mentioned you're in the jungle, and I'm going to assume that that was your shamanic experience. And we hear this term shaman and all of that. What exactly is that? You know, some people might hear it and think it's like diabolical or, you
All
know.
right, well, there's something I just want to say. I mean, I've been using the word shaman for a lot of years, which has to do with a healer that steps from the ordinary to the non-ordinary realms of awareness, the non-ordinary being the meditative state, and the ordinary being our everyday world. And they believe that one is just as real as the other. But one thing I just want to say, because I want to be very respectful about it, now most of my teachers were in South America. In North America, the Native American Indians have basically asked that we don't use the word shaman. Okay, so they feel that that's not a respectful word for them. So I have been trying to be respectful of that, even though it's in my book. I want to be very respectful to all of those that hold the ancient wisdom traditions, because I have such amazing gratitude for those people that have passed down this body of knowledge for many, many years.
It's amazing.
It
Native
is
Americans.
amazing.
I met a Native American woman, and I now get from her different herbals and even aromatherapy.
Yeah.
And I know it's legit, and I know it's organic. Yeah, they figured it out long ago.
Yeah, but these healers, they are teachers. They
Yeah.
are healers, they are teachers. They walk between the worlds of the ordinary and the non-ordinary. And the way they heal, they don't even use the same language that we use. There isn't even really a language for it, basically. This is just what they do. They heal by going into these spaces. And what I have learned is that a healing and a cure is not the same thing. So people come into my office, I want to be cured from my depression, my anxiety. Now, I'll also talk about EMDR because I am an EMDR therapist and a consultant. But they can heal from their anxiety, depression, PTSD. But the real healing is the awakening of conscious awareness, changing their identity in the world. So their identity starts to resonate more with, however you want to call it, a soul level, a spiritual side of themselves. And you don't have to be spiritual. You put it in your own language. But they start to just see themselves as part of a greater whole. And as a result, inner wisdom comes to the surface. And the goal of every healer is to make the other person their own healer. And that's what starts to happen. It's a natural, organic process that begins to unfold. So many healers in these ancient wisdom traditions, they will use substances like herbal medicines, homeopathy, what they call medicine in terms of plant medicine. Now, I don't particularly go into that in my practice, but I use the essence of the healing, which is about frequency and vibration. So someone doesn't come to me specifically for that kind of healing. I am an EMDR therapist. EMDR stands for eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. More and more people are hearing about it because celebrities are coming forward and saying, I'm doing EMDR and it's amazing. Prince Harry, he's been all over the place talking about EMDR. And that's really put it on the map for a lot of people. And EMDR is a brain-based therapy that utilizes bilateral stimulation to balance the brain and to actually move the location of where the trauma is stored in the brain from the back of the brain, the limbic system, to the frontal lobe for reprocessing. And it's a therapy that absolutely heals trauma. It's not just about learning to cope differently with trauma. It heals trauma.
It sounds like it's helping you rewire your brain.
That's exactly what happens. You're rewiring your brain. Now, that in and of itself is an amazing process. There's silent space in EMDR because the client is quietly sitting with bilateral stimulation. So EMDR is originally taught where the therapist sits in front of the client and uses eye movement. That's why it's called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It was developed by Francine Shapiro in the mid-1980s, and then she started the EMDR Institute, and this is what she taught. However, what we know now is it wasn't the eye movement that was the cure. It was that eye movement is one form of bilateral stimulation. So I actually use music or tones with my clients with headphones. So the music goes from ear to ear. It's not stereo, it's bilateral.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of fades into the background, and then we do our session that way. So they sit in silent space, most of them with their eyes closed if they choose to, processing a targeted traumatic scene with a negative cognition, a negative belief about themselves. And they're being assisted by bilateral stimulation. So let me just talk for a moment about how this might work.
Sure.
Just EMDR in and of itself. And this is the example I usually give my clients in trying to explain EMDR. Let's take an example of a woman who was raped, and during the rape, she felt as if she was helpless. She doesn't get therapy. She becomes more agoraphobic. She feels unsafe in her world. She retreats from her world, and her anxiety is sky high. 10 years later, that woman comes into treatment, and now the anxiety has generalized. So she's in treatment, and if we look at a scene of the trauma, a scene of the rape, where she felt the most helpless, I would say to her, on a scale of 0 to 10, if 0 is not stressful at all and 10 is the most stressful it could be, how stressful is it now? 10 years later, it's a 10 and more. Put the headphones on her. We target that's the most stressful part of the scene as she remembers it. Okay, there's a different protocol if it's a more recent trauma, but we target the point of the trauma that she reflects on it and obsesses over. I give her some silent space. She's sitting there quietly, and I am getting very centered in myself. I'm feeling my own expansion in myself. And then I will say to her, open your eyes, tell me what's coming up. We find our next starting point. We go back into silent space. That same woman, by the end of the session, is able to say, I just realized that when I was raped, I made choices that saved my life. I'm not helpless. Stress goes all the way down to a 0. And now we reinforce a positive cognition. I can make choices to save my life. I can take care of myself. Now we use the bilateral stimulation in silent space to just integrate that.
It's like she was the victim and turned into the victor.
Yes.
Just by, I want to know how that works with the sounds when you're hearing it, and it's very low in the background.
Very low in the background.
How is that getting the job done?
Because it's stimulating both parts of the brain, alternating right and left hemisphere. And it increases the flow between the neural networks in the brain. Both hemispheres of the brain are more in sync, okay? We are, in terms of EMDR verbiage, every negative belief has its own neural network that gets reinforced and reinforced, which is why 10 years later she's off the wall. Mm-hmm. So we're actually shifting, we're breaking through those negative neural networks, we're reinforcing more positive, and it changes how the brain functions.
It's amazing.
So she goes from this narrow perception to this expanded view. That's EMDR. Not even transpersonal EMDR. That's EMDR. So if people are experiencing trauma and you have not done EMDR and you still have symptoms, even though cognitively you understand everything that's happened, EMDR heals. It just doesn't help you cope.
Basically put, in my mind here, it's as if you go to a massage therapist, and let's say, you have a rotator cuff issue or whatever it might be.
Right.
And they're massaging the tissue in your body,
Right.
your arm, or whatever. It's almost as if this is massaging your brain and almost like waking it up.
Yes. It does in a way. Now you add a transpersonal approach. It's not just about the energy.
What's the difference with the transpersonal approach?
Client is sitting there silently. I'm sitting there silently. I'm not just writing notes. A lot of therapists are writing notes. They're thinking about where do I go next with the client. I am just being still in the space with the client. And I might use what I call in my book cosmic interweaves, okay? There is such a thing called cognitive interweaves.
I thought that's what you were going to say.
Okay, so
Really
a
did.
cognitive interweave is something like, let's say you have a client that was sexually abused as a child, and they feel somehow there's something wrong with them, that they're not good enough. They're not,
Hmm.
they're just not good enough.
Which
Why did this happen?
isn't that, and I don't mean to cut you off here, but isn't that the baseline for many issues that we deal with, that thought that I'm not good enough?
Yes.
We all, I
Yeah.
think, deal with it in some aspect of our lives.
When it's early trauma and when it's repetitive trauma, it's like it's so ingrained. It's really hard to break through that. So I use the EMDR protocol. I don't deviate from the protocol, but I might, well, cognitive interview would be something like saying to that client, do you know, let's say it's a woman, do you know a little girl who at that same age that you were when you were molested, let's say? And she'll say, yes, I do. And I'll say, well, when you think about that child, is there anything wrong with her? Is she dirty? Did she cause this? She'll say, of course not. And then we'll just use the bilateral stimulation, and that helps the client get unstuck from that belief. A cosmic interweave is more like, if somebody is really stuck, I might suggest, and it has to flow in the session, but I might suggest, let's bring in a color light that will help you dissolve that belief. Find that belief in your body. Find that belief as a color, as a form. Just notice it. Let's bring in a color from above that would soothe that. So I take them out of the logical mind. I don't suggest a color. I let them bring it in, and they might view it that way. Some clients will go right to, oh, I sense my higher self, they might say. Bring in your higher self. You don't have to tell your higher self what to do. Look at the scene. What does that higher self do with that little girl? And I just sit and wait. And I tell them to just observe. Don't force anything. But I'm holding the energy with them. So we can use images like that have meaning for the client. I don't suggest anything that doesn't have meaning for the client. It could be colors. It could be forms. The body holds memory as well as the mind. So we go not only into body stress, which you will do with the EMDR protocol, but I have them almost like paint a picture. You know, if somebody comes in with a negative belief where now they've created a physical health issue, let's look at the manifestation of that in your imagination. Take a look at that. Bring all of your awareness into that health issue. Maybe they see it as a tumor or a blockage or something in their system, okay? Let's just look at that, go all the way into that. What is the belief you're holding there? Is there an image? Is there a memory? Or is there just a color? And I just hold the energy with them, and then something changes. Colors change, images change. Sometimes it doesn't make sense at all for the client. If you have a client that has been severely traumatized as a child, there could be periods of dissociation where they don't connect. They don't connect in terms of memory. They don't connect emotionally, or they don't connect physiologically
They
or
might not even
sensory.
remember
They
it.
they
They're
might not. They
disconnected.
block it out. They
Yeah.
block it out. But there's so many ways to go into it. I get clients that say, I know I've been traumatized, but I don't remember the specifics. It doesn't matter. The body remembers it. The energy field remembers it. There's a doorway in. So I draw on not just usual cognitive interweaves or techniques, but I will be in my own, I'll say, higher self, okay? And I will just get intuitive senses about where to go with that. So my book is meant to teach therapists how to understand that and to do that, and for the lay person to understand that there is a method where they can go deeper within themselves.
I'm not a therapist. Could I get a lot out of your book?
Yes. And I give specific meditations in the book. In the intro to the book, I actually give a website link where if they use that link, they could hear me taking them through a guided
Oh, wow.
meditation.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you can't put that in a book, but what I did was I in words, I've given them some guided meditations, and definitely, people can get a lot from the book just by
We
reading
have
the
about a
book.
minute or so left. I believe, and I think you do too, that we can heal ourselves.
Yeah.
We have the power. The body's amazing.
Yes.
Why don't we heal ourselves? What gets in the way of healing from a trauma? Why can't we get it done? by ourselves?
All right. Well, first of all, being traumatized does change the way the brain functions. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, there are people out there that have been traumatized, especially first responders who think they should be strong, they shouldn't be traumatized by being in a horrendous situation. But they can change their own brain function. It's not about thinking your way out of it. You can't do that. There are people that think, "Oh, I'm weak if I need to actually talk about this," or if they are with the police or the fire department, or I shouldn't need this. But you're human. You're human with a human brain, and you can't talk yourself out of a traumatic response. People who have been traumatized, when there's a stimulus in the environment, they might go into fight, flight, or freeze response, and you can't talk yourself out of that. So you really need help with that to change how the brain functions around trauma.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. We have so much more to talk about. We're out of time. I want to tell everybody to find the book. It's on Amazon.
It's on Amazon, The Sacred Path of the Therapist, Ancient Wisdom, Modern Healing, and Client Transformation. And I think everybody would really enjoy that book.
Dr. Irene R. Siegel, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Next time we get together, we are going to talk about the retreats that you do and go a little deeper in terms of your experience. And we'll get that done next time we get together. Thank you
Sounds
for
great.
watching. Really appreciate it.
Your daughter just had her first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes? B, console her?
Don't worry, sweetie. This is gonna happen a lot.
Or C, find her a new boyfriend?
Nice, single boys. That was weird.
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
When it comes to making plans, you are the best. Remember the best planned 90 minutes of your life? Or that surprise party for your parents' golden anniversary? You get the golden planning. The same way you plan each detail for those moments, start planning to protect you and your loved ones from a natural disaster. Sign up for local weather and emergency alerts. Prepare an emergency kit and make a family communications plan. Protecting your family is the best plan you can make.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. This is for anybody that's gone through challenges in their life. Maybe you are now. We call them traumas. And a lot of times people think, oh, a trauma's got to be like a car accident, something major. No, a trauma could be something that you were 7 years old, you walked past the kitchen, you heard one of your parents say something to somebody else, you internalized it, and now it's limited your life moving forward. We're talking with somebody that has blended energy healing with therapy, wrote a book about it to help other therapists, and it's great having her with us. She is Dr. Irene R. Siegel. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's great being here.
Learning a lot about all of this. We dug deep into EMDR, and just for anybody that may have missed what we talked about previously, EMDR is?
It stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a therapy that actually heals trauma.
You've changed things in that you've blended the concept of energy, and we talked previously about how energy is everything. We're all energy. We all have a vibration. This table is energy. You are a vibration, a high one, I might add. Everybody is. And then you've blended that with therapy at the same time for just an amazing result to help people with trauma and help therapists deal with those people as well.
Yes.
Irene, what was your breakthrough moment? Where was the aha moment where you said, oh, wait a minute, this energy thing with these modalities, I can really get it done so much better?
It wasn't a conscious decision. I like to joke, I tell people that I was born meditating. I came out of the womb meditating. Okay.
I wish I could say that. I'm still trying to figure it out.
So even as a kid, I was meditating, and my parents would look at me and say, what's with this kid? You know, where did she come from? But It was really when I was in my late 20s that I started actually working with teachers and healers in our everyday world who would teach me about going into these non-ordinary spaces. So it really has been so integrated in me that I couldn't separate the me without this to just the therapist. And what was happening was when I actually first took the EMDR training, which I believe was in about 1996, I noticed that my clients were having extraordinary experiences. And I wondered, do other therapists have this going on in their sessions? And that's actually what motivated me to go back for my PhD, because I already had a master's degree in social work. I went back for a PhD in transpersonal psychology because I thought, maybe I need more education. I'm not sure what's happening here in my office. And what was happening, and what is still happening, is clients would come in with a trauma, with a negative belief, I'm not good enough, let's say, that we would target the trauma, we would process the trauma using this 8-phase EMDR protocol. I would be sitting with them while they're in silent space of reprocessing, and I would be in a meditative state. We would both be in a mindful place. This attunement would start to happen, and there was a resonance that, from my perception, would expand the field. They would come out of their processing saying to me something like, oh my God, I just realized God loves me. If God loves me, I must be good enough. And we would reinforce that. I have clients that come out of session, let's say they feel they're not lovable. I'm not lovable. We process their trauma, and it's not in minutes. I mean, this takes a little time to do this. We process their trauma. They talk about how they're feeling. They would go from, I'm not lovable, to realizing I am love. We keep reinforcing that in silent space. I'm holding myself in the state of connection to them, the earth, my own higher self, to something larger than myself, a divine presence. I'm just doing this internally. And they would go from I am not lovable, to I am lovable, to I am love, to I am light, to I am.
I am is a big thing.
It's a big thing.
Yeah.
And look, I can't say what it means for them, okay? I'm not defining it for them.
I think it means something different for everybody.
It means something different, but I just hold the space with them. And we keep reinforcing that. So I use music with headphones that goes from ear to ear for bilateral stimulation, which is part of the EMDR protocol. And it's in those quiet spaces of bilateral processing that this starts to unfold. And as long as their experience keeps expanding, I just stay in that phase of EMDR, and I will expand with them. And I'm feeling the energy in the field, and it's this coherent field of energy that starts to, from my own perspective, gets larger and more flowing. And then what comes back from the client is greater and greater awareness as their identity begins to change from someone who's not lovable to someone who can say, oh my God, God loves me, or I am light, or I am love, or whatever that might be.
Would you call that a spiritual awakening?
Well, I think it is. You know, the client will define it for himself or herself, or they will define that. You know, what is that? And often a client will just look at me because they want to know, am I going to judge them and think they're crazy? And they'll say to me, do you think this is crazy? And I'll say to them, well, how does it feel? And they'll say, well, it feels great. And I'll say, then let's just go with it. And then they know I don't think they're crazy. And they just relax into it and they go with it. And when we actually go back then to look at the trauma, the stress around the trauma isn't there anymore. And they're starting to define themselves differently. And it changes how they see themselves in the world, their own inner wisdom's coming to the surface. It changes how they relate to others. And they're more at peace and in a greater flow. So There was a moment for me at the beginning when I was using EMDR, when I started hearing clients say this, where that was like an, oh my God moment for me. Oh my God, look what's happening here. And
What did you do different? Was it the energy?
it was the energy. It was me being still and present, being in that mindful state, attuning to them and resonating with something larger than myself, which is how I am, this is what I do. That's what was different. So I have been teaching therapists how to do that. I've been teaching this through the EMDR International Association. I've been doing presentations at conferences over the last 10 years on this subject matter. I've been running classes through, I'll call it EMDRIA, the EMDR International Association. I've been running classes so they get credit for it and CEs for taking the classes. So this is for therapists who will do this. I have a retreat coming up in April, this coming April, in Hawaii, called EMDR as a Transpersonal Therapy, a cross-cultural perspective where East meets West. We go through the stages of EMDR. We have practice sessions. I bring in an Hawaiian high priestess to teach us about Hawaiian culture, to take us through ceremony, to take us to sacred site, and we bring it all the way back into the EMDR protocol again.
I feel relaxed just hearing that.
Yeah,
I mean,
so-
talk about a Zen moment.
It is.
Like
So-
it's like the universe is all at your fingertips at that point.
There it is. And so they actually practice this in session and they get it. Because you're not going to get this from a logical perspective. I
Yeah.
take them through meditation. We do EMDR from a meditative state. And they love it. Now, I've done this before. Therapists have said this is the best course I've ever taken. I offer 30 CEs, 30 EMDRIA credits. It's an accredited program, and it's part of a larger program that I am putting into place called Masterclass in Transpersonal Psychotherapy. And then I've taken these tools, and I have taught these tools to the average person. I don't teach them the EMDR protocol. Since I have been studying with different native healers, I've been teaching one program called the Sacred Medicine Wheel, Monday nights, every Monday night from 7:30 to 9 Eastern Time. First, it was in my office for many years, many, many years. People would show up for the program. Then the pandemic hit. Then I had to take it online, and now it exploded. I have people from all over the country, from Canada. I even have someone from Israel. I mean, for her, it's the middle of the night.
Yeah.
She comes into the program, and we teach about the 4 directions of the medicine wheel, the major forces of nature, and we work in the non-ordinary spaces as we circle the wheel. And every direction on the wheel is 4 weeks, and it represents different work. And those of this ancient wisdom tradition believe that as long as we're in physical form, we continue to circle the medicine wheel. And then I put together another retreat in Hawaii, following the one for therapists. I have another week set aside in April called Awakening Ancestral Memory. Again, I'm working with a Hawaiian high priestess. She's going to be more involved in this, going to some sacred sites that I can tell you I have been to, and it's been amazing. And then we're just bringing this into an experience of personal growth and awakening. And I love teaching this.
Wow.
And that's open to anybody that wants to join them. It's all on my website, and you can find the registration links there. But this is what I'm meant to do. My mission is to awaken consciousness. I do it as a therapist. I do it as a meditation healer and teacher, and it flows and blends in EMDR. So there wasn't one moment for me where I said, oh my God, this aha
Kind of,
moment.
it sounded like it evolved.
It evolved.
Yeah.
It evolved inside of me.
With EMDR, can that be done virtually? You're talking about wearing
Yes.
headphones? Yeah? Okay.
Absolutely.
And do you do EMDR for pretty much every patient, every client, or it's only for those? I know you deal with a lot of people that have dealt with trauma of all different shapes and forms, but is EMDR your baseline? You pretty much use it every time.
Well, there are 8 phases of EMDR, so you're cautious about where you are in your phases with different people. So if someone has had severe trauma, what we call complex PTSD, where there's a lot of dissociation, I'm not going to dive into a trauma with them. But I can spend a lot of time in one of the phases that really builds ego integration and ego strength. And we can stay there for a long. I've had some clients that have been in that phase for a long time, and they are healing. And then there comes a point where they're ready to deal with the trauma more directly. It really depends on the person. So I'm really careful. I get a very good history at the beginning, so I know what I'm dealing with. I ask a lot of questions, and then together we determine, how are we going to move forward and do this work together.
Have we all dealt with trauma?
On some level we have. And what's traumatic for one person is not traumatic for another person. Everybody's unique and different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally agree. In my journey, as I learned more and more about this, that again, it could be, and tell me if you agree with this, a lot of it between 0 and 7 as a child. There's a lot of stuff that you're so impressionable as a young child that these things wouldn't affect anybody else. It turned into a trauma and a limiting belief.
Absolutely. And there are some traumas that happen for children before they can talk. So it's called pre-verbal trauma. They don't have words for it. They can't put it into words. They don't have memory, but they know something happened because of how they react in their world.
I've heard in the womb.
It could happen in the womb. It could happen at birth. It could happen in the womb. So because EMDR can be utilized so much with the imagination and with body sensation, with sensory experience, you can heal pre-verbal trauma without the client having the memory or the way to put it into words. And there have been times where I do believe clients were processing pre-birth traumas. That can happen. I've had clients that have come into me because we always want to go back to the earliest moment of trauma to heal the trauma. I've had clients that have said, I think I'm going to a past life. Is that okay? And they give me this look like, now do you think I'm crazy? And I'll say, let's just go there. Tell me what's coming up. And we work through the imagination, and it changes something. Then, of course, we bring it back to their current life, okay? And we work with a more positive belief system at that point and see how things change for them now.
If somebody has a limiting belief or a challenge in life, let's say relationships, whatever it might be, and you work with them, do they often identify where the trauma came from, or you could heal them and they never even knew?
It could be either one. A lot of people remember, and a lot of people remember things that at the time just seemed like this was their normal life. But as an adult, when they start to talk about it and process it, they realize that was
what the heck?
Really,
what went on in my childhood?
That was really unhealthy. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's, and again, everybody's different. There's always a way in.
A lot of people are on medication. There's nothing wrong with that. Whatever works for you. Have you found working with people that they've abandoned the meds because they've found ways to deal with maybe anxiety and depression?
Well, some people come to me, let's say they have really high anxiety or depression, and they're not on medication. And they'll say to me, do you think, and this is the first session, and they'll say to me, do you think I should also go see a psychiatrist and get evaluated for medication? And I'll say to them, well, what I prefer to do is to start EMDR with you. And I'll say, can you tolerate this for another few weeks? They'll say, I've tolerated it my whole life. I'll say, let's see what happens, okay? Often, they don't need to go for the medication after that. If they come in and they're on medication, look, this is between them and their psychiatrist, whether they're on it or not. I'll certainly make a mental note that they're on it, but when they start to feel better, often I will have a conversation with the psychiatrist to see if it's appropriate to start taking them off the medication. And again, it depends on the person. They can do this work on medication. What makes it harder for me is if they've never been on medication, they're saying, I'm going to go on medication now, and we're starting EMDR. Then I can't tell what's the EMDR and what's the medication.
Right. Right.
So that's why I prefer, if you're coming to me, you've never been on medication, let's just work with the issue.
Blank slate.
Let's see what happens.
A little bit further.
Let's see what happens.
You've mentioned, Irene, meditation a lot.
Yes.
It is a big thing in your life, a big thing in helping people. I know we have some time left. So many of us struggle with meditation, thinking it has to be this or it has to be that. What's your advice for somebody that says, I just want to meditate. I want to get into that state where I blocked everything out and I'm just in a very relaxed state?
Well, the first advice I would give is work with a teacher. Don't try it on your own.
Okay.
You know, so, and it's whatever you're drawn to. I mean, I teach guided meditation. I teach meditation based on native traditions, but there's Buddhist meditation out there. There's Zen meditation, you know, whatever you're drawn to, but work with a teacher. When I lead a meditation, and I even record some meditations, I always vibrationally program the meditation. I don't know if a lot of meditation teachers do that. I bring a meditation I bring a frequency into the meditation and I record them. So actually, one thing that I do if people haven't meditated before, during the pandemic, I started to do free guided meditations for personal and global healing. First, I was doing it weekly on Friday nights. People would come, they say, I don't meditate. They would come, they'd have extraordinary experiences. I recorded them. I have some of them on my professional Facebook page. And then when the pandemic slowed down, I started to slow it down to every other week. Now I do it monthly. I have one coming up next Friday night. Once a month I have that. So people can come and try it. Anyone can come. It's for free. And I always incorporate an aspect of personal healing with planetary healing. And now,
And boy, do we need that
boy,
now.
do we need it. So because now what's happening in our world, especially with Israel and Palestine, I might increase the frequency. I'm going to see what people need at this point. But
When you say frequency, how often? Or
how often?
Okay.
How often I'm doing
we're talking
the
about
free
frequency
meditation.
and vibration.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Okay.
No, the frequency of how often I offer this.
Gotcha.
So yes, and people will say to me, you know, I've tried meditating. I can't seem to do it. Well, they're just trying to do deep breaths on their own, or they're listening to an app. You know what? Work with a teacher. That's what I would suggest. Work with a teacher.
I've tried it all. Not with a teacher, though, I will say that. But when you get back to the basics, what is meditation? Isn't it listening, being able to listen to yourself?
It's going deep inside.
Right.
Shifting your awareness from outside stimulus to internal stimulus. Deep breathing, quieting the mind, and surrendering to an experience. It's not easy for a lot of people. That's why I'm saying if this is not easy for you, work with a teacher who can help you do that. And part of the way they help you is because they're holding an energy for that meditation. And they're helping you be still in that meditation. And
You've
they're
said
guiding
that
you.
before.
Yeah.
And I'd love you to define it even more. Holding a frequency, a vibration for meditation.
So for example, one of the things I teach is called Awakening Your Light Body. This was originally created by Dwayne Packer and Sanaya Roman. Many of the ancient wisdom traditions are teaching their form of awakening your light body. They believe that in our energy field, there is a spiritual body that's awakening overall on the planet. But there are steps you can go through to awaken different centers close to a soul level that bring you into the light body. Now that's a higher frequency. So I took the program many, many years ago. I've been teaching that program for over 30 years. So what I do when I help somebody meditate is that I'm in a meditative state. I open up my energy field. I get into that higher field. And
Through
I
meditation.
get through meditate. Well, so let's define that. For most people, meditation is very quiet, eyes closed, okay?
Yep.
And that's the easy way to get it in. Over time, this energy is just integrated in you. I can close my eyes really quickly, or I can sit here and talk to you, and I can just feel my energy expand in some way.
How are you doing that?
I'm doing it through some imagery. I'm doing it through intention. I'm doing it by just bringing awareness to it.
Intention. Key word.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you expand your energy before this interview?
This morning I was very aware of it, okay? I came in, I sit down, I'm just bringing awareness to it because it helps me flow in the interview. When I teach, when I speak, when I work with a client, I want to be in the flow. I don't want to be sitting here thinking, what am I going to say to Steve next? Okay? This is an organic process that helps you stay in a flow of higher awareness, basically.
It's almost like a football player before a game,
Same
and they're on the
thing.
field, and they're practicing and they're stretching and they're getting ready for what's to come.
Right.
It sounds basically like the same thing. Preparation.
Preparation, and you stay in the moment. You stay in the experience of, even football players, you think they're thinking hard while they're out on the field. There's been a lot of studies done on flow in sports, and what is flow? What does it mean to be in the flow? You can't think your way into a flow because you can't think fast enough to determine your next move as an athlete. You have to just be in the experience. Even as a dancer, I took years of dance classes until I was probably in my late 20s, and I was so busy with so many other things. And you learn as a dancer how to pick up a routine like that. You think I'm thinking about it, or dancers are thinking about it. They're watching it, they're doing it, and they're in the flow.
That was the most impactful thing I ever experienced in my journey, which now, things change. So 3 years we just came up on in this journey. I met somebody after my journey started. And the one thing she said to me was, why don't you ever live in the moment? And I said, what are you talking about? She goes, you live in the past, you live in the future, you're not living in the moment. I'm like, I don't know, what do you mean? And it took me about a week and a half to process that. And I was like, oh, I don't.
Right.
And many of us don't. And there comes the anxiety and depression.
And if you're in the moment, fear does not exist in the moment.
Exactly.
Fear exists
fear is
when
the future.
It's ruminating about the past and being afraid of the future.
Yeah.
But if you're in the moment,
nothing can hurt you.
Nothing can hurt you in the moment.
Is it easy? No.
No.
Sometimes you gravitate, but if you can find yourself being in center in the moment more often, you're going to benefit so much more from that.
Exactly. So when you ask me what do I do, and I run those light body energies, I teach others that program so that they can learn to put aside their conscious thoughts, be in their own flow of energy, and expand into what's called the light body, which is their spiritual body.
Yeah.
So I straddle the worlds.
Take me there.
Well, you know what? I straddle the worlds between being a therapist and being a spiritual teacher.
Yeah.
And I can teach anybody to meditate.
And that's what makes you different. That you've harnessed the energy, EMDR, different modalities, therapy, and blended it all together. It's all in the book, The Secret Path of the Therapist. Amazon, we can find it, right?
You can find it on Amazon. You can find it on W.W. Norton and Company, because they published the book. You can find it on their website as well. Mm-hmm. And you can find all of these programs on my website, drirenesiegel.com. And all of my programs, my retreats, everything is kind of laid out there.
So if you're a therapist, they would just go to your website. You have all the details on the workshops, the groups, everything that's coming up?
Everything that's coming up.
Fantastic.
And if they want to come to the free global and personal meditation, it's under special events. And I post it. And right now it's still once a month. I might increase that. So we'll see. See what happens.
I learned so much talking with you today. Really did. Fascinating. And just all of these things that I had different pieces in my mind of energy, therapy, EMDR, you kind of blended it all together for it's almost like the perfect storm of helping people.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I do believe so. And I believe this is 21st century healing. And that's why I'm talking. This is my mission, to awaken consciousness. Clients, anybody in the world, for anybody in the world. So I hope people will join me with this.
Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, truly appreciate it. And thank you for watching, and check out the book, The Secret Path of the Therapist.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down,
It's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.